pull up to the gas station, cap your card, start pumping, and just stare at the numbers spinning. $40, $50, $65, and you haven't even filled up yet. You do a quick mental calculation, this is 30% more than it cost you 6 months ago. Same car, same commute, same paycheck. But somehow the math stopped working in your favor. And the worst part, you don't even fully understand why. You just know something changed and nobody gave you a memo. My name is Smith, and I spend way too much time thinking about how energy prices quietly destroy household wealth while everyone argues about stuff that barely moves the needle. If you're someone who knows oil prices affect your life but has no idea how deep that rabbit hole actually goes, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, because today we're going to pull back the curtain on what's really happening with oil, why it matters more than almost anything else happening in the global economy right now, and what you can actually do about it before this gets worse. Here's the thing. Most people think oil prices are a gas station problem. They're annoyed for a week, they complain about it at the office, and then they mentally file it away as just another inconvenience of modern life. But that thinking is exactly what keeps people financially reactive instead of financially prepared. Because oil is not just fuel. Oil is the circulatory system of the entire global economy. It moves inside almost every product you buy, every service you use, every piece of food on your table. When the price of oil goes up, it doesn't just hit your gas tank, it hits everything. And right now, it is hitting everything. Let's start with the number. Crude oil recently crossed above $95 per barrel, and some analysts are now projecting we could see triple digits, and that's $100 or more, before the end of the year. Now that might sound like a financial news headline that doesn't really connect to your actual life, so let me make it connect. When oil prices rise by 30%, transportation costs rise. When transportation costs rise, the grocery store pays more to stock its shelves. When the grocery store pays more to stock its shelves, you pay more for everything in your cart. A 2023 study from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas found that a sustained 10% increase in oil prices eventually translates to roughly a 1-point increase in core consumer prices. That doesn't sound massive until you realize core inflation was already running hot, and you're now essentially pouring gasoline, pun very much intended, on a fire the Fed has been desperately trying to put out. Here's what most people don't realize. The reason oil prices are surging right now is not one thing. It's a collision of several forces that individually would be manageable, but together create something much more volatile. Let me walk you through them. First, you have OPEC+. That's the cartel of oil-producing nations led by Saudi Arabia and Russia, and they've been deliberately cutting production. In 2023, Saudi Arabia announced a unilateral cut of 1 million barrels per day, extended it multiple times, and Russia followed with its own cuts of around 300,000 barrels per day. Combined, you're looking at over 1.5 million barrels removed from global supply every single day. When you reduce supply and demand stays the same or grows, price goes up. This is not complicated. This is just supply and demand behaving exactly the way it always does. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but can't the United States just produce more to fill the gap? And this is where it gets interesting, because the answer is kind of, but not fast enough, and not without consequences. U.S. shale production has recovered significantly since the pandemic lows. The U.S. is actually producing around 13 million barrels per day right now, which is near record levels. But here's the catch. Shale wells deplete faster than conventional oil wells. To maintain output, producers have to constantly drill new wells. And drilling new wells requires capital, labor, equipment, and time. You can't just flip a switch. The industry estimates it takes anywhere from 6 to 18 months to meaningfully ramp up production from new drilling activity. Meanwhile, OPEC is cutting right now. Second force, China's demand recovery. After years of zero COVID policies that suppressed Chinese economic activity and crushed oil demand, China reopened. And when the world's second largest economy comes back online after years of suppression, it needs oil. Industrial production, manufacturing, transportation, air travel, all of it is ramping back up. Goldman Sachs estimated that Chinese oil demand in 2023 would reach record highs of around 16 million barrels per day. That's a massive injection of demand into a market that was already supply constrained. Third force, the geopolitical wildcard. You've got ongoing instability in the Middle East, tensions between Russia and the West that show no sign of cooling, and pipeline infrastructure in Eastern Europe that remains at risk. Every single one of these factors creates what traders call a risk premium. Essentially, the market charges extra for oil because there's a real possibility that supply could be disrupted at any moment. That risk premium can add anywhere from $5 to $15 per barrel on top of whatever the fundamentals already suggest the price should be. Now, let's zoom out and talk about what this actually means for the global economy at a macro level, because this is where most finance videos completely lose the thread. They talk about oil like it's isolated. It's not. Think about oil like the foundation of a building. When the foundation shifts, everything built on top of it shifts too. Food prices shift, manufacturing costs shift, airline ticket prices shift, shipping rates shift, mortgage rates shift because inflation shifts, which means central bank policy shifts, which means interest rates shift. You cannot surgically contain an oil shock. It leaks everywhere. Here's the psychological piece that I think is genuinely underappreciated. When oil prices spike, consumer confidence tends to drop even before people have actually felt the full financial impact. The University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index typically shows a measurable decline within weeks of a significant oil price increase. Why? Because the gas station is visceral. You feel it in real time. You watch the number climb with your own eyes. Most inflation is invisible. You notice it when you get the grocery receipt, maybe once a week. But gas prices hit you twice a week in big red digital numbers at eye level. It triggers a psychological response that economists call the salience effect. Visible pain feels bigger than equivalent invisible pain. And when consumers feel pain, they pull back. They spend less. They delay purchases. They save more out of anxiety. And when that happens at scale, it becomes a drag on GDP growth. The International Monetary Fund has historically estimated that a $10 increase in the price of oil per barrel reduces global GDP growth by roughly 0.2 percentage points in the following 12 months. That sounds small until you realize global GDP is measured in tens of trillions of dollars. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in economic activity that simply doesn't happen. Jobs that don't get created, businesses that don't expand, wages that don't rise. Here's the thing about emerging markets, and this is the part that barely gets covered in Western financial media. But it matters because the global economy is interconnected whether you want it to be or not. Countries in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America that import their oil are getting absolutely crushed right now. These nations often have currencies that are already weak relative to the dollar, and oil is priced in dollars globally. So when oil goes up and their currency is also depreciating against the dollar, the real cost increase they're experiencing is far more severe than what we feel in the United States. Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Kenya, these countries have faced genuine currency crises in part because of how dollar-denominated commodity prices interact with currency weakness. When emerging market economies struggle, it creates reduced demand for exports from developed economies, more financial instability that can ripple through global banking systems, and eventually more political instability. This is not abstract. This is what happens when foundational commodity prices spiral. Now let's bring this home, back to you. Back to your actual financial life, because that's what actually matters here. The average American household spends somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 per year on gasoline. That's a conservative estimate. If prices are up 30% from last year, you're looking at $600 to $900 additional dollars per year just to power your car. For a family living on a median household income of around $75,000, that's roughly 1% of pre-tax income just evaporating. But the gas is just the tip of the iceberg that everyone can see. The iceberg below the surface is everything else. Airlines have already announced fare increases tied to fuel costs. You can expect to pay 10 to 15% more for domestic flights this year compared to last. Grocery delivery services, the ones that have been so convenient and so aggressively priced, are raising their fees because fuel is a direct input into their cost model. The trucking industry, which moves about 70% of all freight in the United States, has already seen diesel prices push well above $4 per gallon in multiple regions. Those higher trucking costs get baked into the price of literally everything that arrives at a store near you. Now you might be thinking, okay, Smiths, this is pretty grim. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept it? Absolutely not. Here's where I want to talk about the behavioral side of this, because I see so many people make the same two mistakes during periods of high energy prices, and both of them end up costing more money than the oil price spike itself. Mistake number one is panic-driven lifestyle changes that aren't actually financially optimal. I've seen people make decisions like selling a perfectly good car to buy an electric vehicle right now when EV prices are still elevated. Interest rates on auto loans are near 6 or 7%, and the payback period on the fuel savings doesn't work out for 4 to 6 years. If you're planning to keep a car for 10 years anyway, maybe that math makes sense. But making a $40,000 purchasing decision in an emotional response to a 30-cent per gallon increase, that's letting the gas station make your financial decisions for you. Mistake number two is doing nothing and just absorbing the cost passively. Complaining about gas prices without adjusting anything is the financial equivalent of watching your house flood and arguing about whose fault it is instead of grabbing a bucket. So here's what I'd actually recommend, practically, right now. Start by auditing where energy costs are hitting your budget in ways you haven't tracked. Most people only look at their gas spend, but your electricity bill, your heating costs going into fall and winter, and any delivery fees or service surcharges you're paying, add all of it up. Get the real number. You will almost certainly be surprised by how much higher it is than you think, and having the real number is the only way to make real decisions. Second, if you drive a lot for work or have a longer commute, look at every legitimate tax deduction available to you. The IRS standard mileage rate for 2024 is 67 cents per mile for business use. That deduction exists precisely because fuel costs are real and significant. Most self-employed people and small business owners leave this on the table every single year. Third, and this is the one that sounds counterintuitive, consider whether this oil spike is actually pointing you toward an investment opportunity. I want to be careful here because I am not a financial advisor and this is not personalized investment advice, but I will say this. Historically, energy sector equities, that's oil and gas companies, pipeline operators, and energy infrastructure firms, tend to outperform the broader market during sustained periods of high oil prices. The logic is straightforward. When the price of the product you sell goes up and your production costs don't rise proportionally, your margins expand and your earnings go up. The iShares US Energy ETF tracked the energy sector's performance during the 2021 to 2022 oil surge and showed gains well above 60% while the S&P 500 was declining. That's not a guarantee of future performance, past performance never is, but understanding the relationship between oil prices and energy sector earnings is genuinely useful knowledge when you're trying to build a diversified portfolio that's at least partially resilient to the exact environment we're in right now. Here's what most people don't realize about economic cycles and commodities. The very thing that creates the pain, the high prices, also contains the seeds of its own correction. When oil prices spike, several things happen simultaneously. Consumers reduce consumption. Producers race to increase supply to capture higher margins. Investment flows into alternative energy because the economics suddenly make more sense. And over time, 18 months, 2 years, sometimes longer, the market rebalances. This has happened repeatedly throughout history. The oil shocks of the 1970s, the spike to $148 per barrel in 2008, the crash to negative $40 in 2020, the surge to $130 in 2022 following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Every spike has eventually corrected. The question is not whether prices come down. The question is what happens to your financial position in the meantime. Which brings me to the bigger psychological point I want to leave you with today. The people who build wealth over time are not the ones who make perfect predictions about oil prices or stock markets or interest rates. No one consistently does that. The people who build wealth are the ones who build systems that are resilient enough to absorb shocks without forcing them into pass-myth decisions. An emergency fund that covers 3 to 6 months of expenses means an oil spike doesn't force you to put gas on a credit card at 24% interest. A diversified investment portfolio means energy sector gains can partially offset the consumer pain you're feeling at the pump. A habit of auditing your actual spending means you always know where your money is going, so nothing sneaks up on you. The global economy runs on oil. For better or worse, for now, that is a reality. And the people who understand that reality, who understand how it moves, where it creates pain, where it creates opportunity, those people are the ones who stay financially calm when everyone else is losing their minds at the gas station. Here's the thing. Economic disruption is not new. It has always existed. Every generation faces its version of this, a shock that feels unprecedented, a price that feels impossible, a news cycle that feels unrelenting. The generations that built wealth through those periods didn't do it by hoping the disruption would go away. They did it by understanding what was actually happening, adjusting where they could, and staying rational when the emotional pull was to panic. You are watching this video because you want to be that person. The one who understands, the one who adjusts, the one who stays rational. So, go audit that energy budget, run the real numbers, make decisions based on data, not on the anxiety you feel watching the pump. And if someone you know is feeling financially blindsided by what's happening at the gas station right now, share this video with them, because understanding this stuff is the first step. And now, you understand it. I'll see you in the next one.